And now I'd like to introduce Terry Weaver. Terry is the Rotary Coordinator for Zone 33, serving through 2025. Terry is committed to making things as simple as possible for leaders by providing clear data and encouraging them to double down on success. Terry's growth philosophy can be summed up in 2 words: consistent and moderate. Welcome, Terry and friends.
Thanks so much, Leanne. If you're wondering what a Rotary Coordinator does, our job is to help district leaders help clubs be the best they can be in terms of consistent, moderate membership growth. We are trainers, advocates, and coaches. My zone stretches from South Carolina to Pennsylvania, the mid-Atlantic states of the United States. And I would like to now introduce my counterpart to the north, Herb Klotz.
Thanks, Terry. My name is Herb Klotz. I live in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And as Terry described the zone coordinator, I am the Zone 32 coordinator, which covers roughly the Northeast United States. So with that, I'd like to introduce Louisa Horn.
Thanks, Herb. So I'm based in Halifax, Canada, right on the East Coast, and I have the privilege of being the innovative club advocate lead for both zones 28 and 32, which means that I support a team of people who help clubs and districts with any great new ideas or ways of being innovative in how they be Rotary. And so we're very excited when we get new cool ideas and fun things to try, and we do what we can to help. Over to Doug next.
Thanks, Louisa. Hi, everybody. I'm a coordinator for Zone 28, which is the largest zone in at least this group. It includes 6 time zones, almost all of the clubs and districts in Canada, plus pieces of the United States in Maine, New York State, Michigan, and Washington State. Back to you, Terry.
Thanks. Let's do a quick recap of where we've been and where we're going. Our August webinar was the 5 attributes of successful and agile clubs, essentially the earmarks of what we found cause clubs to consistently and moderately grow. In September, we covered work smarter, not harder, meaning that if we have some solid data in terms of the problem we're trying to solve in our clubs, are we trying to solve an attrition problem? Are we trying to solve an attraction problem? Perhaps both. Then we can actually work on the problem at hand. And then finally, what comes next? And that's the subject of our webinar today. Now, the question is, why would we want to grow membership? Well, simply stated, a Rotary Club that is growing is, first of all, a more dynamic place to be and a much more fun place to be, but it's also a Rotary Club that can steadily increase its impact on our communities. Of course, the reverse is true of a Rotary Club that's declining. But one of the big reasons is, we are first a membership organization. Paul Harris started this thing because he needed some friends. And in my personal experience, most of the value I've gotten out of Rotary has been through the acquaintanceship of other Rotarians. So we're a membership organization. That's our DNA. What we do is community service. But I've learned that if you get membership right, pretty much everything else comes along for the ride. It's a lot easier to run a club at 35 members versus 18. It's a lot easier to do service projects when the club is growing, and certainly a lot easier to raise money and support the Rotary Foundation. And then finally, those new members are the feedstock for our future leadership, and they'll provide our clubs greater impact, more reach, more bodies, more heartbeats, and of course, more funding. So I'd like to hand it off to Herb, who will talk about those 5 attributes of a growing club.
Okay, yes, thanks, Terry. So back in August, we talked about this study that we did across 2 zones in North America. And we received feedback from about 55 Rotary clubs that had grown significantly during the pandemic. In other words, they used the pandemic as an opportunity for growth, not an excuse. And while this study was done in North America, we believe that what we learned is pretty much applicable almost anywhere in the world. So these were the 5 attributes that we saw. The first one was strong leadership. It was very clear to us that the leaders of these clubs made a difference. And if it weren't for the strong leadership, a lot of the other things we're going to talk about probably wouldn't have happened. But the second one is these clubs had many events and projects. So they were doing projects at least on a monthly basis, probably more. And a lot of them were COVID related. In other words, helping different aspects of the community related to COVID. While sometimes clubs have large projects, in this case, we were learning about many, many different smaller projects. Third, these clubs were visible in the community. All this work that they were doing, they didn't keep it a secret. And a primary way that they did this was through their social media, but there were other ways as well. And number 4, they had what we called active, intentional member engagement. So these clubs did not let their members fall through the cracks during their time, during the time of COVID. And not only that, they made sure when they brought in new members that they got them engaged right away in things that they were interested in. And then finally, these clubs had clear goals and a growth plan. This didn't happen by accident. They set goals and they executed against those goals. So with that, I'm going to transition back to Terry to talk a little bit about our second webinar that we held in late September.
Thanks, Herb. I used 2 terms as we were introducing the content today, attrition and attraction. I'd like to talk first about the attrition and the concept of an attrition rate. The attrition rate is the rate of loss, the rate at which members leave your club over the course of an average year. Now, it's simple to calculate. It's the number of members that are lost divided by the number of members we started with. So in a 40-member club, for example, if we lost 6 members, that would be an attrition rate of about 15%. Now, I want to also make it clear that this may be one of the first times you've heard this term in Rotary. We've always talked about something that's much happier, which is the attraction rate. I'm sorry, the retention rate. And the retention rate is, of course, the rate at which you retain members. And it's exactly the same thing as the attrition rate, just subtracted from 100. So 85% retention and 15% attrition are exactly the same thing. The difference is that if I'm a club president and I know that my retention rate is 85%, that's not terribly useful to me to know how many people I'm likely to keep. What I need to know is how many people I'm likely to lose that I'll need to replace with new members over the course of the year. And basically, in most cases, about half of that attrition is for reasons we can't control at all. Now, we have to attract members to replace those and to grow as well. So your attraction rate is the rate at which you're gaining members. Same math, if a 40-member club was attracting, say, 8 new members a year, that'd be an attraction rate of 20%. And the math is simple. I'm attracting members at a rate of 20% or 8 new members, losing them at a rate of 15% or 6 terminated members. I'm growing by 2. That's a 5% net gain, which is right in the sweet spot of what we describe as consistent and moderate membership growth. So I'd like to talk about this idea of working smarter, not harder. And the first lesson, which I just mentioned, is that attrition is real. Members leave membership organizations, and they leave them at fairly predictable rates. If your average attrition rate in your club has been 12 to 14% over the past 3 years, it's likely going to repeat itself unless something significantly different happens. In North America, about the best we see is 8 to 10% attrition rate. And what that means is, I believe, that must be right at the life happens level. If the best clubs on the continent are losing members at only 8 to 10%, those must be the clubs that are really good at holding on to members. That'd be sort of the top 15 percentile of all the clubs on the continent. Then we take a look at these clubs that already have low attrition in that 8 to 10% range. And the lesson there is that you can't get a whole lot better by working harder at retention, because retention is actually overrated as a growth strategy. I'll say that again. Retention is overrated as a growth strategy. You cannot retain your way from 20 to 25 members. Said another way, we can't retain our way to growth. It's a two-way street. We have to manage our retention, reduce our attrition, but at the same time, we have to attract members at a rate higher than whatever that low retention is that we can accomplish. And then finally, probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, your attraction rate has to exceed your attrition rate. So if you've been historically holding on to members at about an average rate of, say, 15% attrition, you need to attract members at a rate of, say, 20%. And then finally, as I mentioned during the poll, attrition rates greater than 15% need attention. Now, that attention would be asking the question honestly, what is it about our club that is causing members to leave? Because here's a fact. Members really don't leave Rotary. They don't wake up one morning and say, you know, that four-way test thing, I'm just not sure about that. Members leave Rotary clubs because they get tired of a club that doesn't have significant service projects, is not making a difference in the community, and is not providing them the emotional return on investment that they're looking for from Rotary. So now I'd like to hand it off to Doug for another topic.
Thanks very much, Terry. You know, it's often true that the challenges we face feel like we've got a big boulder blocking our path forward, and it can feel overwhelming. But it is really true that whoever it was that said knowledge is power, I believe that absolutely to be true. And so what we would like you to be thinking about is the information that you have about yourself and your club and your community and your own unique circumstances, the data on your membership and the other data that you can get through surveys and so on, really is the lever that you can use to achieve growth and to create change. And it's not something that you should be afraid of. There is lots more that you can do. So Louisa and I would like to talk to you for a while about that. Louisa.
Thanks, Doug. So at the last sessions, one of the things we said, that it's often said, that if you can get one really good idea that take away from a session, that's really good. So we had an idea that actually has 4 parts. We cheated a little bit and broke it down into 4 different parts. And I want to just review the first couple, and then we're going to move into some new material for today. But we said first, the I was really around looking internally at your club. And that's what you've had from Terry's data review. That's the information that you're going to get from that to really study what's going on in your club and have that look in the mirror that's real. So you see my little stuffed dog that I carry around with me to meetings. He's looking in the mirror and he's not seeing the real thing. He thinks he's real. He thinks he's pretty hot, and he's not being realistic about what he sees in the mirror. We want you to have a really good hard look and have that internal view of what's going on in your club first. Then the next part, look outside the club. Discover what's going on in the context around you. Know where the opportunities are. Know where the partners are. Know what other groups are doing. Know where you can make an impact and what's possible in terms of the context in which you live. Now, lots of people have asked questions about wanting very specific ideas and looking for that silver bullet, if you like, of success. What's this one great thing we can do to turn things around? Well, maybe a disappointment to you, but there isn't one thing. You heard those 5 attributes. If you're thinking about all of those 5 attributes, and if you're doing the things with the data to understand what needs to happen, then you're able to move on, because knowing what you have inside, knowing what's possible outside, the next letter is putting it together and exploring the gaps. And that's really what strategic doing is all about. It's asking that question, what could we do? Knowing where we are and what our capacity is, knowing what's going on around us, what could we do? Then you go to what should we do and what will we do? And that's the action. So there's my little dog flying in the air with excitement to take action. And that's, again, what strategic doing is all about, that we're going to talk about for the next little bit together with you. You've got a lot of the information already. It needs to be customized to your context. So therefore, we don't have this one right answer for everybody, but I think we do have the key bits of the puzzle that you can put together. So next.
So one of the keys is for you to take the time to have a really good understanding of the community that you're living in. So once you've done that, and once you have a really good sense of what's going on, and what caution you, I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody whose club members, senior leaders in his club, felt that they had a really good understanding of what the community needs were, when in fact they had not developed any kind of relationship with others in the community who actually were in the profession of meeting and understanding community needs. So it's really important that you reach out and be prepared to seek the wisdom of other people to understand what the issues of concern are in your community, whether it's mental health, whether it's homelessness, whether it's unemployment, whatever the issues are. And then the next step is to be engaged with other members of your club to understand, well, okay, we can do anything we want to do, perhaps, but we can't do everything. So what are our key priorities? What turns our club members on most? What are the things we think we can have the biggest impact on? Another option is to see the extent to which your community's priority needs match with our eyes priorities. So what resonates with the members, and what are you actually able to do? Small things successfully accomplished are much better for everyone than big things that you fail at. And as I talked before about, looking for community partners, looking for other people who are concerned about what is happening in the community, looking at business groups, community leaders, political organizations, religious organizations, faith organizations, and so on, and understanding, collaborative community efforts can achieve powerful results. And as a group of Rotarians, you don't actually have to own everything that you do. Louisa.
So one of the concepts that's most important to think about when you're looking at your club is all of those moments of truth, those insights into what's really happening. We all think our clubs are wonderful, and it's hard to sometimes see things the way that others who visit us might see them. But this is key to being able to strategically do the things that will make a difference. So one particular club that I have experience with looked at moments of truth in all aspects of the club. So every avenue of service, what's going on when people come to the door, what's going on with the website, how do we welcome people, how do our meals and our costs feel to people, every possibility, speakers, service projects, socials, every one of them needs to be looked at. Because quite often we jump to the idea of recruiting new people. And I've worked with a number of clubs that have put way too much focus on recruiting, talking people into joining, as opposed to starting with those moments of truth and making sure their club is irresistible to people first. And that is critical. We want to have a really good look at where we are, address those moments of truth that need to be addressed, whether it's through agile action with more activities, more public engagement, more common engagement within the club, all of those attributes that you heard about, nothing new there. Are we doing everything we can to be irresistible? And are we prepared to have the courage to make the changes we need to make so that people will, in fact, be attracted to our club, or to start something new that they will be attracted to? Next one.
So one of the other things we'd like you to keep in mind is this basic truth. Everything you do or everything you're engaged in really has a connection and relates to everything else that you do. And we really want to encourage you to be thinking in terms of, being moderate, taking your time, not being afraid to take your time, and to not worry about getting ahead of yourself, because all of the things that you do in one area can have an impact in other areas as well. Let me give you an example. Let's say that your priority is to improve the engagement of your members. Well, the reality is that a more engaged membership is more likely to be able to take on and to be inspired to take on a greater number of projects, more innovative kinds of projects, and so on. Well, if you're taking and engaged in more innovative projects, it's more than likely that you're going to increase your club profile in the community. And if you increase the profile of your club in your community, you are far more likely to attract more members. And so things work together in that way. Small steps are better than great big huge ones, and don't be afraid to pursue moderate growth. Louisa.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Doug. And that's, again, why there isn't just this one silver bullet or a recipe that we can give to you to say, here's how you're going to all become growth culture clubs. I wish there was, but that's not the way it works. We have to figure out all of those pieces that interconnect and work to make them make a difference in our own scenario. So this particular chart is one that you might have seen before at a previous webinar that outlines the different categories of clubs based on the data that Terry was talking about. So we have clubs that have high attraction and low attrition. Attraction numbers bigger than the attrition number, they're growing. Fantastic. We also have the other opposite corner, high attrition, low attraction, more people leaving than coming. They're in the danger zone. And the message that Terry gave you was, whatever category you're in, you're likely to stay there until you do something significant to change it. And that's our whole message here, is to think about those 5 attributes and the other things that we'll talk about in the next little bit of what can you do to change it, because that's a scary place to be. Across that middle one, we have the aging out clubs. Every year, they're a year older. That's just the way it is. And chances are there's not a lot of coming and going at all, but over time they will decline and they'll probably move over. We've got the ones with high turnover, that revolving door, lots of people coming, lots of people going. Well, there's some issues there around engagement and around all of those pieces connecting that you can look at. And then in the middle, the fragile balance. They're sort of so-so, and we'll talk about those so-so clubs in a little bit.
So now we would like to take a few minutes and talk to you with some suggestions about what you might consider doing and how you might respond depending on where you find the data tells you your club is at. And so we wanted to start with those of you who are in clubs with a growth culture. And I do want to make the point that if your club isn't one that has a growth culture, there's no reason that you can't begin the process of changing that circumstance so that you become a club with a growth culture. And we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those clubs around the world. And Herb reminded me the other day that I needed to give an example of a club that was that had that growth culture. And my mind immediately went to a club that is about an hour and a half from where I am. Okay. And that club in the 2004 had 56 members. Today, or as of July 1st of this year, they had 95 members. Over that 18-year period, they have consistently grown by an average of 2 members a year constant growth. And in the last 5 years, they grew by at least 2 members every single year. That club, and they describe themselves this way and have been described to me by others as dynamic, diverse, and fast-paced. So there's an example of a club that has the growth culture. But I also have to be honest with you and share the opposite example. And this is of a club that had strong succession and leadership. And at the time period that I'm referring to, they had a membership of 55. One person, one club president came in, made some dramatic, significant changes that began a process of decline. So that strong club started off with 55 members, and as of the other day, their membership stood at 13. They began a slow decline. So my caution to you is not to be complacent, to understand that it doesn't take much to make things worse any more than it doesn't take much to make things better. So keep that in mind. Understand what it is about your growing, successful club that makes you successful, and keep doing that. But don't be prepared to be good, because good is not good enough. You want to be innovative, you want to be dynamic, you want to be irresistible, and sure, you continue to be that way. Seek continuous improvement. Look at ways that you can ensure that your leadership is consistent, collaborative, and has continuity. And finally, take a hard look at whether your club, as successful as it really is, whether it genuinely reflects the diversity of your community, and whether or not you are reaching the community in the way that is really possible for you to do. Louisa.
Thanks. Great points around the consistency. And while it's wonderful that we have so many changes every year in our leadership, we also need to be sure that there's collaboration and that succession planning is in place. So that's critical for keeping all of those dots connected. The other thing that's important here when we think about high turnover clubs in particular is that this really comes down to a membership experience or member experience. That's the silver bullet, if there is one for you, is that member experience is what makes it or breaks it. And it involves all of that network drawing that Doug showed you earlier with everything connected to everything else. Your member experience is based on that. So that's why you have to look at all of those moments of truth and understand the member experience that people have, because your experience could be different from somebody brand new to the club who doesn't understand what you've been doing all along. And so lots of people come in, their member experience doesn't work, and they're gone. So critical to look at those moments of truth and to have people ready to talk to them. So one of the other little key things around successful growth clubs that have addressed this kind of high turnover is that they have a team of people focused on making sure that their member experience is great and that they are attracting people. And committee, I don't know about the definition from the dictionary, but I don't think it can be one. And we have a lot of committees of one trying to do a lot of these things in clubs. So one that comes to my mind that had this high turnover, they had a great goal to bring in a certain number of people in a particular year, and they did it. It was a really big number. It was like more than 20 that they brought in, which for this small club was a big deal. They did not look at member experience. They did not look at programs, meals, engagement, programs, projects that people could be involved in, how welcoming they were, the cost. They did not look at all of those things. And most of those people and some others are now gone. So they lost the opportunity. They became a revolving door because they didn't bring people into an irresistible club. They didn't properly orient them. The expectations were not clear, and they didn't make sure that they had what they needed to stay, that they were enabling the passions of the people they were attracting. They didn't do exit surveys to understand why are they leaving and let's learn from that. And they didn't address the real truth. So very often we do what I like to call random acts of Rotary without thinking about all of the implications and all of the dots that need to be connected. We attract or we have an event and we bring in a whole bunch of people And we later say, well, that didn't work because they all left. Well, there's a lot more to that. The moments of truth will help you understand why they left. So if you're one of those high turnover clubs, you've got some research to do. Okay.
So now let's look at clubs that are in what we call the danger zone with both high attrition and low attraction. And what we suggest that you think about is whether or not it's time for you to shake things up. Let me give you another example of a club. And the club that I'm thinking had over a period of years had declined to a membership of 25. Well, they're champions. They had champions and leaders within the club who decided that it was time to have a look in the way that Louisa has already described at what they were doing. And they did look at their moments of truth. They did look at what they were doing and how they were doing things. They did look at the fundraisers they were engaged in and whether or not they were providing value to members and the community. They looked at the experience that club members were having. They looked at the culture of the club and how people were treating each other and so on. They looked at the diversity of the club and the extent to which it matched the community. They did surveys so that they had really good data and understood where they were at and what the possibilities are. So they started at around 25 and the club is now at 66. They are diverse. They are dynamic, and they're a place that is attractive for people to belong. So things that you could do is to have a look at, all right, what is the nature of our leadership? Do we have consistency and continuity? Do we have the right people in the right positions? Are people tired as leaders, or are they inspired and engaged? Do you have people within your club that can take on the champion the challenge of making the changes that are necessary? The other thing to keep in mind is there almost certainly are clubs that are doing really well in your area. I know that's not always true because we have some clubs that are isolated, but don't be afraid to reach out to other clubs for help. You have district leaders and district membership committees and so on, whose job is there to help you. You should have assistant governors and other positions whose job is to provide you talent and resources. And then you're within a region and a zone where people can help as well. As Louisa talked about, though, it's the honest conversations with yourselves and with each other are really important. Do we do what is best for our club and our community? Do we have the culture that we need to have to engage and inspire people to participate and belong? Are we prepared to change, or do we have people who are stuck in old ways of doing things blocking us from moving forward? And a final point, don't be afraid to look at alternatives that your club can engage in. You could create alternative experience by the creating of satellite clubs or companion clubs or impact clubs and so on. So there is a wide diversity of things that you can do that can shake things up and begin the process of moving forward and improving things for yourselves and your club. Louisa.
Thanks.
Oh no, the next one is me. Sorry about that. So the other group of clubs that we want you to think about are clubs that are aging out. In our experience, you really have two fundamental choices that you have to face. The first one is you can engage in a process of transformation and looking at the decisions you have to make, what you need to do to become more irresistible, other models, satellites, and so on that you could look at. And the other choice is to opt for the status quo, which you have every right to choose, as long as you understand that the status quo is almost certainly going to result in decline. The status quo means a slow movement to non-existence. But the other point that I want to make to you is while you have the right to stay the way you always are, that doesn't include blocking other people from creating other alternatives, whether that's a new club in your own community. And let me give you a specific example of another club in another community. This was the oldest, most senior club in that community. But they were tired and they were stuck in their ways. They were happy to be the traditional club from the 1960s and the 1970s, and they had no interest whatsoever in doing anything any differently than what they were. They had a core group of members who wanted things to change, who wanted to do things differently, and that core group of members was blocked in every effort to do things differently. So 16 of those members left and created a new club. The original club was outraged that somebody would have the nerve to do something like that. And they engaged in a campaign all the way up to Rotary International to ensure that that club was disappeared. They wanted that club to be gone. So their focus was on protecting themselves, not on growing Rotary. It's important to note they weren't successful at that, but it's also important to note that that club, at the time that the new club formed, had 44 members. They now have 8, and we all know where they are going. So you have a choice, and it's not an easy one, and I won't pretend that either option is pleasant. You can transform, or you can stay the same and probably die. Louisa.
But stay out of the way of everybody that's wanting to move past you. That's the key thing there. So we've got lots of clubs in the middle, lots of clubs that are kind of so-so. They're okay. And every year they probably say, well, this year we hope will be different. We'll set some goals and we hope it will be different. But unless they have looked at those questions of what could we do, what will we do, and now let's put some action in place to make it happen. That's the strategic doing, not just a plan that sounds good for the next year with lots of hope associated with it. But what are we going to do right now? And what are we going to come back and check in on 30 days from now? And then 30 days after that, you know how fast the Rotary year goes. We're almost at the halfway mark. And have you reached half of your goals already? If you have, fantastic. But my guess is lots of clubs have not. So now's the time to say, here's what we're going to work on right now. And in 30 days, we'll come back and look at how we're doing. How do we do things with our leadership and our governance? And what are those goals that we need to be agile, right? We have to be agile to adjust to changing needs. And if we're not, do we do it through a satellite? Do we do it some other way? Just get out of the way so we can make that happen. Where are we going to find those people? We want new clubs. We want a new satellite. Where are we going to find them? How are we going to grow the existing club? Use all of the things we've always done. We've got the usual, everyone invite one. Look at professions in your community. Do you have people that reflect all of those professions? Who are the leading employers? You have people from all of those. What's the chamber list? What are the trade group lists? What are the people who win awards in your community for business and entrepreneurship and new development? Look at all of those things and work on those lists, just like you would if you were a company rolling out a new product. What would you do? You'd want to know all about the people that you can talk to. Now, this isn't just about numbers. I know there will be people saying, oh, just numbers. The numbers are critical to know where you are and what you need to do. But this is about impact and making sure that that fragile balance club in the middle doesn't slip down. And the way that's going to happen is by paying attention to member experience. Remember, that's what it's about. And the numbers of people to have the capacity to have impact in your community. So enable them, enable their passions, find out what the people that you want to attract and want to be irresistible to, what do they want to do? Is it something related to environment? I don't know. It might be rescuing cats. I use that as an example sometimes just to say it could be anything. I don't know what their passions are in your community, but you need to know what the people you'd like to attract are excited about and engage them by enabling it. Not just recruiting people to come and do the same thing. And then the 5 attributes: get out in the community, be visible, have partnerships, have projects, work hard, do stuff, and people will want to join you. You have the silver bullets. You have those gems of what it's going to take to do it. There is no other recipe. There's no magic wand. You've got all of the pieces. If you look inside, if you take those data that are available to you, if you learn about your community and you put all of those pieces together, look at your moments of truth and figure out how to be more irresistible than you already are.
So I really like this image, and it comes as a result of work that Rotary has done on change and the process of change and engaging people, because it really shows the flow and the movement that the process of change really involves. The truth is that a club with a growth culture is a club that moves and evolves and changes. The club that's an hour and a half away from me that I talked about earlier on, in 2004, almost certainly looked quite differently than it does today. And that is because they've rolled and moved forward. The important thing to keep in mind, and I think it's awesome that so many of you have that high level of confidence in your ability to make things happen, is don't get too impatient if things don't happen as quickly as you think they ought to. I always say, if you want to swallow an elephant, it's best to do it one bite at a time. Terry talks about moderate and consistent growth. The club I just used as an example, that's 2 members a year. That isn't spectacular by any means, but it's at a pace that they can handle and move forward with. So don't be afraid to take your time. Don't be afraid to take steps that may seem to be small and simple. Just keep plugging away. And the way the model works is your starting point is to assess, to use your club data, other information you can gather, whether it's through club surveys, membership surveys, whether it's assessments, community needs assessments, and so on. Get really good data and information that helps you have a solid knowledge base of who you are and where you're at. And then you begin the process of designing and understanding, well, what you could do and what's going to work in your unique circumstances. What is the nature of what are priorities for your club? And but it's an important part of this. Don't be afraid to try some experiments. And don't be afraid to fail. Not everything you are going to do needs to be successful. And the cliche about failure being a wonderful teacher is absolutely true. So don't be afraid to fail. And then once you've got your design in place, you're going to build and put in the systems, processes, projects, people, and so on that you need to actually get things going, and then you implement. Just get out there and do it. Try the experiment, try the new system, work on it. And then finally, do what you need to do to keep the successes going, to understand how it is that what you did worked and why it worked. And as we talked about earlier on, doubling down on that so that you keep moving forward. And then when you're confident that you've done enough, it's time to start all over again. After a year or two or whatever, have another look at what you've done and just continue the process of moving forward, reviewing regularly and keeping on top of who you are and where you need to be. Thank you. Next slide.
So I think we pop back to Leanne now to see what questions we're going to tackle. I want to just add that is such a critical thing, that circle doesn't end. It's a cycle because it keeps going around and around. And I noticed somebody say that they felt like they were drinking from a fire hose, which of course you can't do. You have to stand to the side a little bit and get sprinkled. So think of this as being sprinkled. These are the things that will help you be irresistible. I saw a few chats run by about what makes you irresistible. Living those 5 attributes, living the strategic doing approach and looking at those moments of truth and taking action on them. That's what will make you irresistible. Leanne.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I would encourage everyone to share what makes you irresistible in the chat. We'll share the chat with you, and you'll have even some more actions to take. So we have lots of questions to answer, not a ton of time, but I really want to start with this one. Someone asked, what are the 3 best concrete actions to attract new members? No theories, real proven action, concrete tasks. So very specific there. Herb, I want to start with you.
All right, thanks, Leanne. So in a previous version of a survey that we did, similar to the one we did that we learned about the 5 attributes of growing clubs, we asked clubs that had grown significantly in a given year. This was back 2015-16 to 2018-19. What were some of the reasons why you felt your clubs grew? And this was a whole series of phone interviews. And one of the things that I learned when I did that study was a very consistent message that I heard back from these clubs was, well, they held what I'm going to just call membership attraction events. So they defined some sort of an event that was going to focus on inviting more people to either learn more about Rotary or learn more about Rotarians and what a great group of people these are. And they were very successful at doing this. And they were all different kinds of events. Some of them were social, some of them were Rotary informational events. But the other thing that we learned was the event itself was not enough. The key part was what came after the event and making sure that whatever happened in terms of who was interested, that there was appropriate follow-up with those prospective members after the event. I've often heard people say, well, we held one of those events and it didn't work. Boy, have I heard that. And I'm an experimental, I'm a scientist by trade, and I just kind of view it as an experiment. And if it didn't work, well then, okay, how do we change the experiment? And oftentimes it's the follow-up that's key. Now, I'd like to ask Terry to add a little bit to that because they've got some specific ideas on how to hold these kind of membership events.
Thanks, Herb. Something that's been terrifically successful for my own club and throughout our entire Zone 33 is what we call a Rotary Information Hour. And it's simply an overview of what Rotary is and Rotary does. And the reason that's important, not inviting a prospect to a club meeting, but inviting them to some place where they can actually learn some things about Rotary. And it's a roundtable meeting, a boardroom style thing. Not a lot of people, maybe 4, 5, 6 potential members and their sponsors, and just spend an hour focusing on what Rotary is and what Rotary does. Many of our clubs call that Discover Rotary, and we have some great examples of that and an entire toolbox on how to do that. There's no invention required. Everything's been figured out, and we'll put that link in the chat.
Just don't do random acts of Rotary. That's the thing. We do something once and then we say, well, that didn't work. Oh, well, now what? Planning, follow-up, strategy. That's important, as you've heard from those examples.
Now, I want to just also throw in that it's really important to be looking at your own club environment. And, you know, Louisa, when she was talking earlier, gave the example. I know that particular club of, you know, just bringing in this enormous number of new members without, you know, understanding that they had an environment that nobody would want to stay in. So a concrete thing that you can do is to have a hard look at who you are.
Thank you. Someone asked, Louisa, I'm going to ask you as our innovative club advocate, that they started a satellite club, but it really stressed the existing club. What should they have considered before doing that? And what should others think about before starting a satellite club?
I've heard that before, and I've heard of existing clubs being resistant to having a satellite start. Both of those things can happen. And it comes back to capacity and to understanding what's the problem you're trying to solve, And what's the value proposition that you're going to put forward? So what's the reasoning behind doing this? Are you looking at a particular demographic? Are you looking at increasing diversity in some way? Are you looking at a particular cause, a particular interest area? What is it that you're trying to solve, and what is it that your goal is in creating this? And then within the club, the existing club, some education and some discussion about that. I find when you're looking at doing something different that rocks people's world a little bit, they really need to come along with you. So it may take some time to understand and to have some information sessions for your existing club about why are we doing this? And what's the impact of this to us? And people will always say, well, we might lose people to that satellite. Well, if that's the case, my guess, you're going to lose them anyway, because they're not engaged in what you're doing if they're going to jump ship to go to a new satellite. So having those advanced conversations, making sure that everybody's clear about what the purpose is, what the value proposition is, and what the champion's goals are in helping to make this happen will help you get people on side. That would be my immediate reaction to that one.
Thanks, Louisa. Terry, I'd love for you to answer this question, because something I've learned from you is to really focus on what we're good at and what we have. I think sometimes our mentality can be about loss and who's not involved. So someone asks, how would you treat the Rotary member who pays his dues but never attends meetings or service projects?
Well, you mentioned focusing on your strengths rather than worrying about your weaknesses. Now, and anybody that's been married ever has had plenty of help identifying their weaknesses. So let's forget about that. Let's focus on our strengths. In this case, what do you do about this member that's perfectly happy to pay dues for the privilege of being in Rotary, but it just hasn't quite resonated with them in terms of showing up? Get over it. There's nothing wrong with that member. Go find some members that are interested in what your club is doing. At the same time, you know, a successful club is steadily creating new and different service projects. Keep those, shall we say, dormant members, inactive members in the loop by means of particularly e-communications, either text or email, about what the club is doing. And you may stumble onto something that resonates with one or more of them. You may not be able to convert them all, but my answer to that would be, get over that. Let's go focus on finding some people who do want to participate.
So I want to piggyback a little bit on that, if I can, Leanne. You know, a number of years ago, somebody, and this was before I, was reaching outside of the club, somebody said to me that you have to understand that 10% of Rotarians are really turned on to Rotary. And it has become their life. And then 90% of people have a different perspective on it. It's a part of their life, but it doesn't have the same level of importance. Rotarians come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. The diversity of Rotary is not just, skin color and all of those other things. It's our interest and capacity to participate. So we have to be more accepting of that diversity.
Thanks, Doug. So Louisa, last question to you, which is, if people are still looking for help, where would you point them?
Oh my goodness, there are so many resources, and we just happen to have a slide. Look at that. What a coincidence that slide would come next, which I was glad to see. So you have resources available to you. No club needs to do this alone. Yes, you need champions. Yes, you need to do your homework. Yes, you need to have those moments of truth addressed, but there are all kinds of resources and people available to support you in your journey to transform or to do something totally new and innovative. So hopefully at your district level and your zone level, if you don't know who the people are, ask. There should be district membership people. There are zone membership people who should be able to answer questions and help you connect with RI people if they can't answer a question. I get stumped quite often, and I know where to go to find the answer for a club if they're asking me something that I don't know. So use those resources. That's why they're there. Other clubs in your area that have done cool and interesting things, or in other areas, We've got lots of ways to communicate with people. We've got to continue the conversation piece right here with a forum that RRI has, and we can look at other ways. People can reach out to us. We are more than happy to try and support or do presentations at big events, whatever it can be, to help you understand or link you with clubs that have done other things. So if you say, we want to start a satellite club, and I'll use my cats again, because I don't think anybody ever has, and that's probably a good thing. But we want to start a satellite club of people that want to help cats. Well, we're going to find somebody that's helped dogs or something else to help you make that happen. Then my Rotary really has improved so much over the years, whether it's through the Learning Center resources or resources that are there around leadership and membership and professional development and service. The courses are there. We also have zones that have done lots of things. As Terry said earlier, Zone 33, for example, their website is there for people to go and look at their resources. And zones around the world have different resources. You probably don't have to create something new from scratch as you consider how you're going to make your member experience completely irresistible. There's stuff there to help you.
Okay. Well, I think this is our last slide. We are at this point planning additional webinars in February. In fact, right now we're in the midst, Doug kind of talked about this, clubs that grow consistently year after year after year, these clubs that have this consistent growth culture. We've identified over 300 of these clubs across the United States and Canada, and all of our fellow coordinators across the United States are working with us to do this study on clubs with a growth culture. And we're looking forward to the results of that, and we're planning on presenting that to you in February. And then in March, Terry?
Thank you, Herb. In March, we will be rolling out a new club data tool that's under development today. It's a data website that will provide you with this essential attrition and attraction data on your club. More importantly, then, once you set a goal within this platform, it will help you project how many new members you need in order to replace those that are likely to leave, plus grow by whatever moderate increments you want to grow. How many is that? And then you'll have a dashboard month to month to track your progress on finding those new members. And the important thing, look at your club right now. Check with your club secretary, ask him or her exactly how many new members have we put on the books, not just that we're talking to or not just say they might want to join. How many new members have we actually put on the books this year? If that number is 0 or 1, 4 months into the year, that's a yellow flag. And we'll be providing that kind of data in the future.
I think that is so exciting to take the guesswork out of it and let leaders spend their energy on other things. I'm really looking forward to that. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I really want to thank this team of presenters, Herb, Louisa, Doug, and Terry. You've spent hours with me working to prepare these webinars and sharing your expertise and your perspective. So I want to thank everyone, and I hope you've gotten something out of this webinar series, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.